Hi, and welcome to the Punk CX podcast. My name is Adrian Swinsko, and I'm an advisor, best-selling author, speaker, and general explorer when it comes to customer and employee experience. I'm really interested in figuring out what it takes to build organizations that produce better outcomes for both customers and employees. So with that in mind, I seek out and interview CEOs, entrepreneurs, business and tech leaders, authors and academics to uncover some clues about what it takes to build such an organization. Now, some of you may know the podcast as the Rare Business Podcast, but I decided to rename and rebrand the podcast recently. This is for a number of reasons. First one was to mirror the title of my book, Punk CX, which was published in June 2019. 2, because I'm a fan of punk music. And 3, it's just more fun, right? Anyway, if this is your first time listening to one of these interviews, then hello and welcome. And please do dive into the archives at adrianswinsko.com, as I've now completed over 300 of these interviews in the last few years. If this is not your first time listening, then welcome back and thank you. Anyway, that's enough from me right now. Let's get into the interview. So welcome to the next edition of the Punk CX podcast. With me today, I have Don Sherman, who is the CTO and Vice President of Product Strategy and Marketing at Pegasystems. Hey, Don, welcome, or rather I should say welcome back, Don.
Yeah, it's good. It's always good to be back.
Excellent. So, Don, for those people that are not familiar with you, or you haven't, they're not familiar with Pega and things, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and also a bit about the work that you do?
Yeah. So just a little bit on Pega. Pega has been around the business of customer experience now for over 30 years, and we're really focused on helping organizations drive and automate both the processes that power their customer service, because I actually think at the end of every customer interaction is a process where you actually get the work done for the customer, and also all of the real-time decisions that drive better customer experiences. So how do you make sure that every time you're interacting with a customer, you're having the right conversation with them that's going to drive value both to the customer, but also to the business, to the organization.
Awesome.
So, and we work with some of the largest banks and insurance companies, telecommunications companies, manufacturers and governments and healthcare organizations across the world to do this.
Awesome. Now, I know Pega. I'm familiar with Pega for years, and you always very kindly invite me along to Pega World. Now, we know what's happened right now. We don't need to give it a name, but what it has meant is that Pega World this year was a virtual event, and it's called Pega World Inspire. And so I attended it and supported it. By the way, I should also say thank you for sponsoring the blog in regard this month. I thought it was awesome of you. But I also thought the event was you did a great job. I mean, I thought it was tight, it was fun packed, it was interesting, it was insightful. I love that you're bouncing around virtually on the screen to kind of show us kind of what to do and how to do it. So well done on that. I mean, I thought it was a really great job. But as the MC of the overall event, can you give us a bit of an overview of the headlines that came out for you? What really stood out from you from the summit?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of things that really stood out. First, was Alan Trefler, our founder and CEO, spoke in his keynote about how the state of the world that we are in right now demands us both to move really, really fast and respond to some pretty immediate challenges and opportunities that exist. But at the same time, I think has proven an instigator for leaders at organizations to think pretty deeply about their technology, their business architecture, and what they need to put in place to ensure that when we come out of this into what, I think we all will agree is going to be a different looking world, that the organization is set up to be stronger, faster, more empathetic to their customers. And he talked about a way to do that with a business architecture that we call center out.
Right.
which is really around avoiding embedding a bunch of logic into channels, which can be very expensive. It also leads to disconnected customer experiences.
Mm.
And also trying to, re-engineer back-end systems, which are generally kind of product-centric databases,
Yeah.
to make them work for the customer. But
Mm.
instead, you need to operate at the center. You need to actually capture the customer journey, or what we often talk about as the micro journey, those little pieces of the customer journey that are tied to a key outcome.
Mm.
And allow that to be the driver of how you think about your technology. Start with that, what the customer is trying to achieve. How do you make that journey easy, efficient, personalized? And then connect that up and into your channels and back across the systems and the data that you need. But that starting in the center is really important.
I think that's really interesting, Don, if I may, because I've been a big fan of systems thinking in a way, as a way of thinking about organizations, and how do you almost organize a business to respond to customer demand, as it were, rather than actually just organizing it around process and functions and so on and so forth. And that's all, but for very many large organizations, particularly very large and well-established organizations, that can be hard to move away from that process and function model to something which is a bit more, almost like really customer led. And this feels like it's that the center out approach seems like it's a bridge to that in many ways. Would you say that's right?
Yeah, I think it's a way of going from saying, hey, we want to be customer centric, right? Because I don't think you will find many organizations or leaders of organizations that don't want to be customer centric or that aspire to be that. But it's actually, how do you put that thinking into the way that you architect your systems and the way you think about your business logic?
Right.
So that you are building it starting with the customer and the customer outcomes, and then working backwards from that to what the systems and the processes and the channels need to look like, as opposed to sort of starting in. I still think that we've had a little bit of the channel centric customer experiences, like, oh, we're going to put up a chatbot, right? So that, because chatbots are cool. That seems like a great thing to do, right? But I spent, as I was telling you, I spent 45 minutes on a chatbot yesterday waiting for somebody to reply.
Yeah.
Right. So if you don't actually have that thing connected back into your experience, and you actually haven't thought about, well, what is the customer trying to do and how do I get them there? Right. And then, if it makes sense, plug it into a chatbot. When you start the other way around, you end up with these weird experiences that I think customers can sense the inauthenticity of. Yeah. And also, it leads to pretty bad and frustrating moments like what I had yesterday.
Sure. So, but I think so if I may, there's a couple of things that I wanted to kind of like add. I mean, center out, well, not to add, was to actually to talk about, or just to highlight for us. And the first thing that you can said was in the summit, you mentioned very early on that you had conducted research that said the pace of digital transformation was accelerating. I think it might have just sped up even more over the last couple of months. Can you tell us about the research and give us a summary of what you found out, and also like an update on over the last kind of 3 months, I guess, and what you're seeing?
Yeah, so we went out and surveyed C-suite leaders at organizations across the U.S. and in Europe, and what we found was that 62% of them felt that what has happened with COVID is leading them to increase the priority of digital transformation efforts within the business.
Right.
And that they're seeing that as we come out of this, both the efforts they had already made in digital transformation, right, had a positive impact on what they were able to do. 2/3 felt that their already investments in digital transformation put them in a good position,
Right.
but they feel like now that they've learned it, now that they've seen this new way of responding, this new way of acting, they need to double down,
Mm.
and they need to continue to push that envelope.
Okay.
So, and that data squares with the conversations that I hear when I've been talking to leadership at our clients.
Oh, awesome. But then you mentioned the center out before, but then Alan and yourself, you both also talked about what center out is a way of thinking, a framework. But then you kind of went on to talk about this idea of process fabric as a way of facilitating that accelerated change, I believe. I mean, can you tell me a bit more about that? Because those are the really big announcements out of the summit that two of the main announcements which I really like. But process fabric was not just the thinking, but it's almost the how in many ways.
Yeah. So process fabric, or process fabric for those of us that speak US.
Okay. Yes. Thank you.
But it is, and I think that one of the things that I think has happened with the realization that we've seen now is work is going to become increasingly distributed, right? I think we've been saying that for a while, right? Increasingly organizations, have work that happens across different functions in their business. To your point, the work needs to be distributed so that it delivers an outcome for the customer, regardless of the internal functions and silos that exist.
Sure.
I think as we move to more ecosystem-driven experiences, work is distributed not just inside our business, but outside of our business and to our partners. And our workers are now distributed as we're increasingly, all working from our home offices and spare bedrooms, etc. So process fabric is a way to connect all of that distributed work together such that I can align it to a common outcome for the customer and for the business.
Right.
So how do I help organizations where work is being done in different systems, some of them Pega, some of them other vendors, some of them homegrown, but connect all of that work together so that I can see the impact on a customer outcome. I can see the list of work that an individual employee has to do, and I can apply global prioritization rules to ensure that they're always working on the most important piece, regardless of what system it is in.
Right.
How can I see and understand all the work that we're doing or have done for a customer at any given moment, so I better understand the context of the conversation I'm about to have with that customer? So that's what process fabric is all about. And as you said, it's been our customers, our clients, since we've announced it, have been really eager to get their hands and start playing with some of the capabilities. Some of this is built on existing capability in our product. Some is capability in our summer, and then some is our continued vision for how we think work and automation is going to look as we move into an increasingly distributed and digital world.
Because that's it. It feels like an orchestration, planning, and prioritization kind of layer that sits across things. You called it a platform of platforms in many ways.
Yeah, a platform, sort of four platforms, and as businesses think of building digital platforms, and whether you look at Gartner research or you look at a lot of research called MIT, the Society for Information Systems Research, they're all talking about these digital platforms that organizations are going to need to grow. And those platforms aren't one technology. There's going to be AI technology. There's going to be data systems that are based in there. There are going to be APIs that are plugging in there. But what we think is really important is that glue, that connective fiber that holds it all together and actually ensures that the work that somebody is doing is coherent both to the employee doing the work, but also to the customer who we're largely doing the work for.
Yeah, cool. You talk about, you kind of have some brands that are, some of your brands, your clients that are sort of eager to kind of get their hands on or get access to this kind of this new sort of technology. I'm sure you've probably had some that have sort of pioneered the way or pioneered the approach. I mean, I think you talked about Siemens or in at the summit where it's sort of taking this sort of approach. I mean, can you tell me a little bit about how they've responded to it and like sort of what was the problem they were facing and sort of the sort of results that they were able to generate by following this sort of approach?
Yeah, I mean, so Siemens more they've certainly been an inspiration for some of the product stuff that we're doing. So Siemens, um, basically, they have 45,000 users across the world leveraging Pega,
Mm-hmm.
and what they're leveraging us to do is to connect across their different data systems
Right.
and ensure that their processes that ensure data consistency as they develop new products or release new parts or update spec information, right? That stuff ends up being distributed across tens, if not hundreds, of product catalogs and ERP backends, et cetera.
Mm.
And driving a consistent process around how those changes get made, how they get approved, how they get them released back into the backend systems, connecting that work across those systems is what we do. And so the impact on that is, they've said they're able to work at 10 times the speed for 1/10 the cost, which,
Wow.
is, both easier for the employee, more efficient for the business, and also allows them to move faster when they need to make changes, when they need to release new product, etc.
Awesome. That's kind of very cool. And then the final thing I wanted to kind of highlight and is, I mean, it follows in the Pega's rich tradition of advancing the conversation around, where customer service and customer experience and technology can like meet. Where if we go back to, the conversations around open and versus opaque kind of AI systems, kind of the implementation of your T-switch, the kind of the empathetic advisor, kind of functionality within your software. And then you come up and you kind of get said, oh, we've now got this ethical bias testing thing. And I'm just like, what? That's cool. So tell us about that and kind of how did it come about and what it does and what problems it solves or risks it mitigates.
Yeah, look, we've got customers or clients who are using AI to engage with their customers.
Mm-hmm.
And AI is a slippery term. AI, what I really mean are advanced self-learning decisioning algorithms that look at sets of data and based on that data, make predictions about what kinds of conversation. It's not always, and it's actually less often, sell a new product, but it might be education. It might be simple social interaction with a customer. Mm-hmm. But what kind of conversation is going to drive the best impact for the customer and for the business?
Mm.
And that can have incredible results and impact on the overall bottom line in terms of increased revenue, retention, customer satisfaction, etc.
Mm-hmm.
But both our clients and Pega feel really strongly that you've got to do that in a way that is ethical
mm-hmm.
and that is empathetic to the customer.
Mm-hmm.
That at the end of the day, not to sound crass about it, empathy is good business.
Sure.
Customers don't want you to push stuff that they don't need.
Mm.
They want you to understand them, right? And so a lot of our work has been, how do you use this AI in a way that tries to understand the customer's perspective? So one, is it transparent? Can you understand why and how it's making certain decisions? And can you control that?
Mm-hmm.
And know that there are some decisions that you want to make where you can be a little less transparent, what marketing ad you throw up on a web page, right? Versus a decision around, how I judge your risk rating for a loan. I should be pretty transparent about that.
Sure.
I should be able to explain to you how I got to that decision, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, again, that starts with empathy for the customer. What ethical bias testing is about is, if left unchecked, AI algorithms that don't even look at things like protected classes of data, mm-hmm. gender, race, orientation, etc.,
mm-hmm.
right, can actually end up aligning against those things.
Sure.
Because of how the other way the data correlates.
Yeah.
And so ethical bias testing is providing tools to our clients to test their AI algorithms to make sure they aren't inadvertently biasing them against certain protective classes. Because, again, our clients and us, we want to make sure we're doing the right thing. We want to make sure that we're actually engaging people as individuals and making the recommendations in the right way, as opposed to breaking along, the kinds of traditional barriers that there are people out in the streets trying to eliminate.
Sure. And so, does that work sort of proactively, or is it kind of done as a way of you just test as you kind of go? How does the actual testing functionality work?
So the testing guides you in the development of these of your algorithms,
right?
And lets you highlights ones that you need to test,
right?
Highlights as you make changes when you might need to go back and retest and revalidate,
mm-hmm.
and gives you an ability to kind of score this stuff as you go.
Okay.
Yeah. Again, this is all in the guise of, we believe that this AI-powered decisioning technology
mm-hmm.
can drive incredible revenue impacts for organizations.
Mm-hmm.
And they get the best revenue impacts when they apply it in a way that is ethical, transparent, and empathetic to the customer.
Yeah,
so how
awesome. So brilliant. I mean, those are for me, Don, were the biggest things that came out, or some of the highlights that came out of the summit. And it was only like 2.5 hours long, but also people can actually still go, and if they missed it, they can still go and kind of view some of these, all of the videos kind of on demand. That can they just go to pegaworld.com?
Pegaworld.com. Yeah, pegaworld.com. You can see Alan's keynote. You can see our SVP of product, Grim Akinal's keynote, which features somebody from Anna Gleis from Siemens talking about their story. We've got a great keynote from Rich Gilbert, and you talk about being empathetic. He works for a U.S. insurance company called Aflac, and talks about how they needed to respond really quickly in the COVID crisis to make sure that they were available for their customers in a moment of increased demand and need, and what they did in order to do that, and both from a technology but organizationally how they made that happen. And I think it's also a great story.
Nice. Yeah, and I thought there were some really great sessions in there. But let's boil it down. I mean, you're at the sort of on the front line of this, kind of done a lot, and how many people they delve into a lot of this material and start thinking about this, and it can get all very complicated very quickly. And sometimes it's about kind of just getting started, breaking the bonds of inertia and just going, let's just get going. So what would be your best advice to somebody who might be listening to this, who's thinking, I want to improve the service or experience that I deliver to my customers, but I'm trying to figure out where to start? What would be your best advice to them?
So I really like this idea of thinking about a micro journey.
Right.
Because I think a lot of times we talk about the customer journey, and it can become very overwhelming. The customer journey is big and unpredictable and changing all the time. But the micro journey is about thinking about what are the outcomes that a customer is trying to achieve, right? So that outcome might be signing up for a product. Yep. That outcome might be explaining to me why I have a new charge on my bill, right? That outcome might be getting a refund for something that I don't think I should have been charged for, right?
Yeah.
So how do you take that outcome and build the micro journey that quickly gets the customer to that outcome? And what we found works really well is if you take a design thinking approach and you put both business and IT stakeholders in a virtual room, right?
For now.
For now. And maybe for the future, virtual rooms work pretty well for this.
Yeah, sure.
To think about how we drive the customer to that outcome as quickly as possible. We did that recently with the government of Bavaria around supporting small business lending. And we were able to both design and deliver, launch, a small business lending app that automated the process for them and allowed them to again, respond quickly to some of the needs of their constituents in this time in 5 days.
Nice.
Right? So you break the journey down small enough, you can get to results really fast, but you're then building your library and your way of thinking that now allow you to continue to iterate and grow and expand to other micro journeys and connect those micro journeys together into bigger and broader journeys. And over time, you can get to a fully transformed experience. But if you start with a small enough chunk with that micro journey, you can make a real impact real fast.
Awesome. I think that's good advice. It's a bit like that sort of thing, is it? You know, the old puzzle. How do you eat an elephant?
Yeah.
One bite at a time.
One bite at a time. Yeah.
So let's like switch gears a little bit. You know, I want to ask you about sort of like to project forward a little bit, because that's something that I know that you guys do a lot. I wanted to get your view on, what do you think the future of service kind of looks like? I mean, crumbs, whether if we can ever actually predict what the future looks like, given all the changes we're going through right now, and kind of what do you think some of the key challenges kind of might be? I say that it's kind of like almost thinking that, well, that's what a nonsense question, given that I've almost undermined my own question. But let's give it a go. Let's have a gaze into the future and think, what do you think the future looks like? What are what maybe see some of the key challenges are, and what do people need to get good at in order to kind of like to succeed?
So I think there are two big movements that I think happen over time in customer service. One is a move to an ever increasing mix of autonomous service and human assisted service.
Right.
So, autonomous service is things like chatbots or knowledge engines that recommend the right articles, etc. And I don't believe that we get to a point where everything goes completely autonomous.
No.
I think there's always going to be the human in the loop for some interactions. I think there are interactions where people want to talk to people, and the empathy that a human being can show, is going to be absolutely essential to that interaction. So how do we build the right kinds of autonomous experiences that are facing our customers? And also, how do we build autonomous things that assist our humans who might interact with the customers? Things that might go get the data they need on their behalf, things that recommend conversations to have, so that they are increasingly focused not on the systems they are using, but on the customer they are talking to.
Sure.
So I think that sort of rising tide of autonomous capability, and that's going to demand that organizations understand and have capabilities around some of the AI technologies that support it, things like natural language processing, things like decisioning capabilities. So there's a new set of domains and expertise that organizations will need to at least have some form of. I think the other thing that's going to happen is service will continue to become, for the leaders in the service game, more and more proactive and even preemptive.
Sure.
Right? I think so much of the last 10 years has been about moving the service model, from the call center to self-service engines. Right? But and that gets a little bit closer to the moment of need for the customer. But the question is, how can you actually get right to the moment of need?
Sure.
How can you proactively solve a problem for a customer before they reach out to tell you they have the problem?
Yeah.
And I think using event streaming technology and pattern detection engines, and again, other forms of AI, right? We can actually do that. I think we can actually get on the other side of the moment of need. I think we can be preemptive. I think we can predict when a problem might happen and stop it from happening in many cases.
Yeah.
Right.
But I think the interesting thing about that, I completely agree, because we've been talking about proactive service for, I don't know, 20, 25 years now. And then actually all the data and the technology and analytics have already come into play, be widely available, say over the last 5, 10 years, maybe. And then people are still kind of catching up. But actually this, the thing that supercharges all of this sort of stuff and moves you from proactive and then into preemptive is this idea about empathy. And empathy, we can't, if you like, delegate empathy to our technology. It's like, actually we have to build our own, I call it our own empathetic musculature at an organizational level, because that will help us figure out how best to use the tools that are at our disposal, if you know what I mean.
Well, and part of the thing that, not to get too techie about this, but I think one of the things that I think sometimes people forget is I think that empathetic musculature from a technology perspective takes the form of business rules,
Yeah.
takes the form of us being able to not have AI figure it out, but there are
No.
certain things that we as an organization have decided that we want to do, and I
Mm.
want to encode that into my technology,
Sure.
right? Versus there are things that I want an AI engine to learn on my behalf, but
Yeah.
it ultimately takes that empathetic musculature wrapped around all of these different AI engines
Hmm.
in order to make that happen. And you can't magically turn on an AI switch and have this stuff just spitting out better customer experiences.
No.
You actually have to design the customer experience
Yeah.
and then think about where the AI applies and what business rules, what empathetic musculature you want to wrap around the AI
Mm.
to ensure that it's doing the things that are right for your customer and aligned with the values of your organization.
I think you're absolutely right. I think you've got to. There will be a symbiosis. There'll be things that you can learn from the technology that might trigger certain other things, but then it's almost a bit like you have to come with the right sort of intent to be able to get the most out of kind of things. And so there will be this mutually beneficial relationship as long as you decide as an organization that's what you want to do.
And that's right.
Perfect. Don, that's fascinating. And I love the idea about the kind of the automated and the human assisted sort of like frameworks. I think that's very similar to what kind of Paul Greenberg and Jeff Nicholson were talking about at the summit as well. This how things are all going to play out is like a framework of the art of the possible going forward, which I thought was really, really interesting. But is there anything else you'd like to add before I ask you my two sort of ongoing social research come fun questions at the end?
No. I mean, I think we've hashed through quite a bit, and if folks want to learn more, pegaworld.com and pega.com are the places to go.
Fantastic. So, as I say, a couple of questions just to finish with is, so as you know, I published a book called Punk CX back in, last summer. And what I've been doing ever since in these interviews is asking kind of people two questions at the end of these interviews, just as almost like an association kind of questions, for quick fire questions. And the first one I ask is, what one word do you think would describe a more punk approach to customer experience?
Man, you give me one word, it makes it hard.
Okay,
but,
you can have two.
Okay, all right. So I'm gonna take fast, because I think punk moves pretty quick.
Yeah.
And I think punk CX organizations move pretty quick, both in terms of delivering for their customers, but also changing and responding to their customers' needs.
Yeah. Awesome.
And then I also think DIY.
Yeah.
I think punk is all about empowering, everybody to get involved.
Mm-hmm.
And I think punk CX organizations use technologies like low code. They engage the business stakeholders. It's not a top-down, IT fortress that makes all this stuff happen.
Yeah.
It's an engaged group of people who are empowered to solve problems on their own, to plug in and play their 3 chords and make something happen.
Awesome. I love it. And my second and final question is, what company or brand do you think epitomizes that sort of approach?
So, I really have learned a lot working with a client of ours called Commonwealth Bank of Australia.
Okay.
And they leverage decisioning from us to engage about 20 million interactions a day in real time with their clients. But what I think makes them punk is how fast they change how they are interacting with their customers. So when the Australian wildfires hit, they completely shifted every single customer conversation, so that things that maybe before then would have been appropriate, they wanted to respond to the customer's needs in that moment.
Right.
They did the exact same thing again with COVID. Mm-hmm. And that they are constantly thinking about, through that empathetic musculature that you talked about, what is their customer's context, and how do we leverage the technology that they've built in such a way that they can make these changes pretty rapidly? How do they leverage that to respond very dynamically to their customers' needs? So, I think they very much, it's weird to describe a bank as punk, but I think in the way that they engage their customers and apply, what is pretty powerful AI technology to do so, the impact is pretty punk in terms of what they're able to do.
Nice. That's great. I mean, a great example. I mean, it's almost a bit like in line with what was the name of the chap that used to run IBM, who wrote the book Elephants Can Dance.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's the same sort of idea, right? It's like a big organization, if it has the right sort of tools and the right sort of mindset, can do it. It's not about being big. It's about kind of how almost like how fast your synapses can fire, and do they fire in the right direction in many ways.
Yeah, and can you empower everybody in your organization to be a part of how those synapses fire?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Don, that's been super cool, and thanks again for sharing your time and your insights with us. Also, congratulations on kind of Pega World. I mean, folks, do check it out check out Pega, PEGA.com and PegaWorld.com. All the stuff is all kind of there. Don, thanks once again for sharing your time and your insights with us. That's been great.
Oh, thank you very much, Adrian. It's always a pleasure to talk.
Well, that was cool. I hope you enjoyed it. I did, and I always do actually, because I always learn something new when I speak to some of these amazing kind of people. And it's always something new that I can incorporate into my writing, speaking, workshops, and other sort of advisory work that I do. Now, if you're interested in learning about any of that sort of stuff, then you can find out more about how I work with clients over at adrianswinscoe.com. But one final thing before I go, please consider heading over to iTunes or Spotify or whichever podcast platform you choose to use, and do leave a review. Every little helps, as they say. Anyway, that's all for now. Thank you for listening, and do tune in again soon. All the very best. Cheers. Bye.